Hi, it's Saturday, the 27th of February, and I'm trying a new setup to read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I'm going to go from pages 53 to 72. Open your eyes. Werner and Jutta find the Frenchman's broadcasts again and again, always around bedtime, always midway through some increasingly familiar script. Today, let's consider the whirling machinery, children, that must engage inside your head for you to scratch your eyebrow. They hear a program about sea creatures, another about the North Pole. Jutta likes one on magnets. Werner's favorite is one about light, eclipses and sundials, auroras and wavelengths. What do we call visible light? We call it color. But the electromagnetic spectrum runs to zero in one direction and infinity in the other. So really, children, mathematically, all of light is invisible. Werner likes to crouch in his dormer and imagine radio waves like mile-long harp strings bending and vibrating over Zollverein, flying through forests, through cities, through walls. At midnight, he and Jutta prowl the ionosphere, searching for that lavish, penetrating voice. When they find it, Werner feels as if he has been launched into a different existence, a secret place where great discoveries are possible, where an orphan from a coal town can solve some vital mystery hidden in the physical world. He and his sister mimic the Frenchman's experiments. They make speedboats out of matchsticks and magnets out of sewing needles. Why doesn't he say where he is, Werner? Maybe because he doesn't want us to know. He sounds rich and lonely. I bet he does these broadcasts from a huge mansion, big as this whole colony, a house with 1,000 rooms and 1,000 servants. Werner smiles. Could be. The voice. The piano again. Perhaps it's Werner's imagination, but each time he hears one of the programs, the quality seems to degrade a bit more, the sound growing fainter, as though the Frenchman broadcasts from a ship that is slowly traveling farther away. As the weeks pass, with Jutta asleep beside him, Werner looks out into the night sky, and restlessness surges through him. Life. It's happening beyond the mills, beyond the gates. Out there, people chase questions of great importance. He imagines himself as a tall, white-coated engineer striding into a laboratory. Cauldrons, steam, machinery rumbles, complex charts paper the walls. He carries a lantern up a winding staircase to a starlit observatory and looks through the eyepiece of a great telescope, its mouth pointed into the black. Fade. Maybe the old tour guide was off his rocker. Maybe the Sea of Flames never existed at all. Maybe curses aren't real. Maybe her father is right. Earth is all magma and continental crust and ocean, gravity and time. Stones are just stones, and rain is just rain, and misfortune is just bad luck. Her father returns to the Key Pound earlier in the evenings. Soon he is taking Marie-Laure along on various errands again, teasing her about the mountains of sugar she spoons into her coffee, or bantering with Waters about the superiority of his brand of cigarettes. No dazzling new gemstone goes on exhibit. No plagues rain down upon museum employees. Marie-Laure does not succumb to snakebite or tumble into a sewer and break her neck. On the morning of her 11th birthday, she wakes to find 2 new packages where the sugar bowl should be. The first is a lacquered wooden cube constructed entirely from sliding panels. It takes 13 steps to open, and she discovers the sequence in under 5 minutes. Good Christ, says her father, you're a safecracker. Inside the cube, 2 Barnier bonbons. She unwraps both and puts them in her mouth at the same time. Inside the second package, a fat stack of pages with Braille on the cover. 20,000 leagues under the sea. The bookseller said it's in 2 parts, and this is the first. I thought that next year, if we keep saving, we can get the second. She begins that instant. The narrator, a famed marine biologist named Pierre Aronnax, works at the same museum as her father. Around the world, he learns, ships are being rammed one after another. After a scientific expedition to America, Aronnax ruminates over the true nature of the incidents. Are they caused by a moving reef? A gigantic horned narwhal? A mythical kraken? But I'm letting myself be carried away by reveries which I must now put aside, writes Aronnax. Enough of these fantasies. All day, Marie-Laure lies on her stomach and reads. Logic, reason, pure science. These, Aronnax insists, are the proper ways to pursue a mystery, not fables and fairy tales. Her fingers walk the tightropes of sentences. In her imagination, she walks the decks of the speedy 2-funneled frigate called the Abraham Lincoln. She watches New York City recede. The forts of New Jersey salute her departure with cannons. Channel markers bob in the swells. A lightship with twin beacons glides past as America recedes. Ahead wait the great glittering prairies of the Atlantic. The principles of mechanics. A vice minister and his wife visit Children's House. Frau Elena says they're touring orphanages. Everyone washes, everyone behaves. Maybe, the children whisper, they're considering adopting. The oldest girls serve pumpernickel and goose liver on the house's last unchipped plates, while the portly vice minister and his severe-looking wife inspect the parlor like lords come to tour some distasteful gnomish cottage. When supper is ready, Werner sits at the boys' end of the table with a book in his lap. Jutta sits with the girls at the opposite end, her hair frizzed and snarled and bright white, so she looks as if she's been electrified. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. Frau Elena adds a second prayer for the vice minister's benefit. Everyone falls to eating. The children are nervous. Even Hans Schilzer and Herbert Pumpsel sit quietly in their brown shirts. The vice minister's wife sits so upright that it seems as if her spine is hewn from oak. Her husband says, "And each of the children contributes?" "Oh, certainly. Claudia, for instance, made the breadbasket, and the twins prepared the livers." Big Claudia Forster blushes. The twins bat their eyelashes. Werner's mind drifts. He's thinking about the book in his lap, The Principles of Mechanics by Heinrich Hertz. He discovered it in the church basement, water-stained and forgotten, decades old, and the rector let him bring it home, and Frau Elena let him keep it. And for several weeks, Werner has been fighting through the thorny mathematics. Electricity, Werner is learning, can be static by itself, but couple it with magnetism, and suddenly you have movement, waves, fields and circuits, conduction and induction, space, time, mass. The air swarms with so much that is invisible. How he wishes he had eyes to see the ultraviolet, eyes to see the infrared, eyes to see the radio waves crowding the darkening sky, flashing through the walls of the house. When he looks up, everyone is staring at him. Frau Elena's eyes are alarmed. "It's a book, sir," announces Hans Schilzer. He tugs it out of Werner's lap. The volume is heavy enough that he needs both hands to hold it up. Several creases sharpen in the forehead of the vice minister's wife. Werner can feel his cheeks flush. The vice minister extends a pudgy hand. "Give it here." "Is it a Jew book?" says Heribert Pumsell. "It's a Jew book, isn't it?" Frau Elena looks as if she's about to speak, then thinks better of it. "Hertz was born in Hamburg," says Werner. Jutta announces out of nowhere, "My brother is so quick at mathematics. He's quicker than every one of the schoolmasters. Someday he'll probably win a big prize. He says he'll go to Berlin and study under the great scientists." The younger children gape. The oldest children snicker. Werner stares hard into his plate. The vice minister frowns as he turns pages. Hans Schilzer kicks Werner in the shin and coughs. Frau Elena says, "Jutta, that's enough." The vice minister's wife takes a forkful of liver and chews and swallows and touches her napkin to each corner of her mouth. The vice minister sets down the Principles of Mechanics and pushes it away, then glances at his palms as though it has made them dirty. He says, "The only place your brother's going, little girl, is to the mines as soon as he turns 15, same as every other boy in this house." Jutta scowls, and Werner stares at the congealed liver on his plate with his eyes burning and something inside his chest compressing tighter and tighter. And for the rest of supper, the only sound is of the children cutting and chewing and swallowing. Rumors. New rumors arrive. They rustle along the paths of the Jardin des Plantes and wind through the museum galleries. They echo in high, dusty redoubts where shriveled old botanists study exotic mosses. They say the Germans are coming. The Germans, a gardener claims, have 60,000 troop gliders. They can march for days without eating. They impregnate every schoolgirl they meet. A woman behind the ticket counter says the Germans carry fog pills and wear rocket belts. Their uniforms, she whispers, are made of a special cloth stronger than steel. Marie-Laure sits on a bench beside the mollusk display and trains her ears on passing groups. A boy blurts, "They have a bomb called the secret signal. It makes a sound and everyone who hears it goes to the bathroom in their pants." Laughter. "I hear they give out poisoned chocolate. I hear they lock up cripples and morons everywhere they go." Each time Marie-Laure relays another rumor to her father, he repeats, "Germany?" with a question mark after it, as if saying it for the first time. He says the takeover of Austria is nothing to worry about. He says everyone remembers the last war and no one is mad enough to go through that again. The director is not worrying, he says, and neither are the department heads, so neither should young girls who have lessons to learn. It seems true. Nothing changes but the day of the week. Every morning, Marie-Laure wakes and dresses and follows her father through entrance number 2 and listens to him greet the night guard and the warder. "Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour, bonjour." The scientists and librarians still collect their keys in the mornings, still study their ancient elephant's teeth, their exotic jellyfish, their herbarium sheets. The secretaries still talk about fashion. The director still arrives in a 2-tone Delage limousine. And every noon, the African vendors still wheel their sandwich carts quietly down the halls with their whisper of rye and egg, rye and egg. Marie-Laure reads Jules Verne in the Key Pound, on the toilet, in the corridors. She reads on the benches of the Grand Gallery and out along the 100 gravel paths of the gardens. She reads the first half of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea so many times she practically memorizes it. The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the globe. The sea is only a receptacle for all the prodigious supernatural things that exist inside it. It is only movement and love. It is the living infinite. At night, in her bed, she rides in the belly of Captain Nemo's Nautilus, below the gales while canopies of coral drift overhead. Dr. Geffard teaches her the names of shells: Lambus, Lambus, Cypraea, Moneta, Lophiotoma acuta, Lophiotoma acuta, and lets her feel the spines and apertures and whorls of each in turn. He explains the branches of marine evolution and the sequences of the geologic periods. On her best days, she glimpses the limitless span of millennia behind her, millions of years, tens of millions. Nearly every species that has ever lived has gone extinct, Laurette. No reason to think we humans will be any different. Dr. Geffard pronounces this almost gleefully and pours wine into his glass, and she imagines his head as a cabinet filled with 10,000 little drawers. All summer, the smells of nettles and daisies and rainwater purl through the gardens. She and her father cook a pear tart and burn it by accident, and her father opens all the windows to let out the smoke, and she hears violin music from the street below. And yet, by early autumn, once or twice a week, at certain moments of the day, sitting out in the Jardin des Plantes beneath the massive hedges, or reading beside her father's workbench, Marie-Laure looks up from her book and believes she can smell gasoline under the wind, as if a great river of machinery is steaming slowly, irrevocably toward her. And what you hear outside is a snowmobile plowing the road that goes up beside my house. Bigger, faster, brighter. Membership in the state youth becomes mandatory. The boys in Werner's Kameradschaften are taught parade maneuvers and quizzed on fitness standards and required to run 60 meters in 12 seconds. Everything is glory and country and competition and sacrifice. Live faithfully, the boys sing as they troop past the edges of the colony. Fight bravely and die laughing. Schoolwork, chores, exercise. Werner stays up late listening to his radio or driving himself through the complicated math he copied out of The Principles of Mechanics before it was confiscated. He yawns at meals, is short-tempered with the younger children. "Are you feeling okay?" asks Frau Elena, peering into his face, and Werner looks away, saying, "Fine." Hertz's theories are interesting, but what he loves most is building things, working with his hands, connecting his fingers to the engine of his mind. Werner repairs a neighbor's sewing machine, the children's grandfather clock. The children's house grandfather clock. He builds a pulley system to wind laundry from the sunshine back indoors, and a simple alarm made from a battery, a bell, and wire so that Frau Elena will know if a toddler has wandered outside. He invents a machine to slice carrots. Lift a lever, 19 blades drop, and the carrot falls apart into 20 neat cylinders. One day, a neighbor's wireless goes out, and Frau Elena suggests Werner have a look. He unscrews the back plate, waggles the tube back and forth. One is not seated properly, and he fits it back into its groove. The radio comes back to life, and the neighbor shrieks with delight. Before long, people are stopping by Children's House every week to ask for the radio repairman. When they see 13-year-old Werner coming down from the attic, rubbing his eyes, shocks of white hair sticking up off his head, homemade toolbox hanging from his fist, they stare at him with the same skeptical smirk. The older sets are the easiest to fix. Simpler circuitry, uniform tubes. Maybe it's wax dripping from the condenser or charcoal buildup on a resistor. Even in the newest sets, Werner can usually puzzle out a solution. He dismantles the machine, stares into its circuits, lets his fingers trace the journeys of electrons. Power source, triode, resistor coil, loudspeaker. His mind shapes itself around the problem. Disorder becomes order. The obstacle reveals itself, and before long, the radio is fixed. Sometimes they pay him a few marks. Sometimes a coal mother cooks him sausage or wraps biscuits in a napkin to take home to his sister. Before long, Werner can draw a map in his head of the locations of nearly every radio in their district. A homemade crystal set in the kitchen of a druggist, a handsome 10-valve radiogram in the home of a department head that was giving his fingers a shock every time he tried to change the channel. Even the poorest pit houses usually possess a state-sponsored Volksempfänger VE301, a mass-produced radio stamped with an eagle and a swastika, incapable of shortwave, marked only for German frequencies. Radio. It ties 1 million ears to a single mouth. Out of the loudspeakers all around Zollverein, the staccato voice of the Reich grows like some imperturbable tree. Its subjects lean toward its branches as if toward the lips of God. And when God stops whispering, they become desperate for someone who can put things right. 7 days a week, the miners drag coal into the light, and the coal is pulverized and fed into coke ovens, and the coke is cooled in huge quenching towers and carted to the blast furnaces to melt iron ore, and the iron is refined into steel and cast into billets and loaded onto barges and floated off into the great hungry mouth of the country. Only through the hottest fires, whispers the radio, can purification be achieved. Only through the harshest tests can God's chosen rise. Jutta whispers, "A girl got kicked out of the swimming hole today. Inga Hachmann. They said they wouldn't let us swim with a half-breed. Unsanitary. A half-breed, Werner. Aren't we half-breeds too? Aren't we half our mother and half our father?" "They mean half-Jew. Keep your voice down. We're not half-Jews." "We must be half something. We're whole German. We're not half anything." Arabet Pumsel is 15 years old now, off in a miner's dormitory, working the second shift as a fire damper. And Hans Schilzer has become the oldest boy in the house. Hans does push-ups by the hundreds. He plans to attend a rally in Essen. There are fistfights in the alleys, rumors that Hans has set a car on fire. One night, Werner hears him downstairs shouting at Frau Elena. The front door slams. The children toss in their beds. Frau Elena paces the parlor, her slippers whispering left, whispering right. Coal cars grind past in the wet dark. Machinery hums in the distance, pistons throbbing, belts turning smoothly, madly. Mark of the Beast. November 1939. A cold wind sends the big dry leaves of plane trees rolling down the gravel lanes of the Jardin des Plantes. Marie-La is rereading 20,000 Leagues. I could make out long ribbons of sea wrack, some globular and others tubular. Laurentier. Laurentier, Cladostrophae, with their slender foliage. It's Latin. Cladostrophae. With their slender foliage, not far from the Cuvier gate, when a group of children comes tramping through the leaves. A boy's voice says something. Several other boys laugh. Marie-La lifts her fingers from her novel. The laughter spins, turns. The first voice is suddenly right beside her ear. "They're mad for blind girls, you know." His breath is quick. She extends her arms into the space beside her, but contacts nothing. She cannot say how many others are with him, 3 or 4 perhaps. His is the voice of a 12 or 13-year-old. She stands and hugs her huge book against her chest, and she can hear her cane roll along the edge of the bench and clatter to the ground. Someone else says, "They'll probably take the blind girls before they take the gimps." The first boy moans grotesquely. Marie-Laure raises her book as if to shield herself. The second boy says, "Make them do things. Nasty things." An adult's voice in the distance calls out, "Louis? Peter?" "Who are you?" hisses Marie-Laure. "Bye-bye, blind girl." Then quiet. Marie-Laure listens to the trees rustle. Her blood swarms. For a long and panicked minute, she crawls among the leaves at the foot of the bench until her fingers find her cane. Stores sell gas masks. Neighbors tape cardboard to their windows. Each week, fewer visitors come to the museum. "Papa?" Marie-Laure asks. "If there's a war, what will happen to us?" "There won't be a war. But what if there is?" His hand on her shoulder, the familiar clanking of keys on his belt. "Then we will be fine, ma chérie. The director has already filed a dispensation to keep me out of the reserves. I'm not going anywhere." But she hears the way he turns newspaper pages, snapping them with urgency. He lights cigarette after cigarette. He hardly stops working. Weeks pass and the trees go bare, and her father doesn't ask her to walk in the gardens once. If only they had an impregnable submarine like the Nautilus. The smoky voices of office girls swirl past the open window of the key pound. They creep into apartments at night. They booby-trap kitchen cupboards, toilet bowls, brassieres. Go to open your panty drawer and you get your fingers blown off. She has nightmares. Silent Germans row up the Seine in synchrony. Their skiffs glide as if through oil. They fly noiselessly beneath the bridge trestles. They have beasts with them on chains. Their beasts leap out of the boats and sprint past the massifs of flowers, down the rows of hedges, past the massifs of flowers, down the rows of hedges. They sniff the air on the steps to the grand gallery, slavering, ravenous. They surge into the museum, scatter into the departments. The windows go black with blood. Dear Professor, I don't know if you're getting these letters or if the radio station will forward this or if there even is a radio station. We haven't heard you in 2 months at least. Did you stop broadcasting or maybe is the problem ours? There's a new radio transmitter in Brandenburg called the Deutschlandsender 3. My brother says it is 330-something meters tall, the second tallest man-made construction in the world. It pushes basically everything else off the dial. Old Frau Stressmann, she's one of our neighbors, she says she can hear Deutschlandsender broadcasts in her tooth fillings. My brother said it's possible if you have an antenna and a rectifier and something to serve as a speaker. He says you can use a section of wire fence to pick up radio signals, so maybe the silver in a tooth can too. I like to think about it. Don't you, Professor? Songs in your teeth? Fräulein says we have to come straight home from school now. She says we're not Jews, but we're poor, and that's almost as dangerous. It's a criminal offense now to tune into a foreign broadcast. You can get hard labor for it, things like breaking up rocks 15 hours a day, or making nylon stockings, or going down in the pits. No one will help me mail this letter, not even my brother, so I'll do it myself. Good evening, or Heil Hitler, if you prefer. His 14th birthday arrives in May. It's 1940, and no one laughs at the Hitler Youth now. Frau Elena prepares a pudding, and Jutta wraps a piece of quartz in newspaper. And the twins, Hannah and Susan Gerlitz, march around the room impersonating soldiers. A 5-year-old, Rolf Hopfer, sits in the corner of the sofa, eyelids slipping heavily over eyes. A new arrival, a baby girl, sits in Jutta's lap and gums her fingers. Out the window, beyond the curtains, the flame atop the waste stack. High in the distance, flaps and shivers. Out the window, beyond the curtains, the flame atop the waste stack. High in the distance, flaps and shivers. The children sing and devour the pudding. Frau Elena says, "Time's up," and Werner switches off his receiver. Everyone prays. His whole body feels heavy as he carries the radio up to the dormer. In the alleys, 15-year-old boys are making their way toward mine elevators, queuing up with their helmets and lamps outside the gates. He tries to imagine their descent, sporadic and muted lights passing and receding, cables rattling, everyone quiet, sinking down to that permanent darkness where men claw at the earth with a half-mile of rock hunched on top of them. One more year. They'll give him a helmet and lamp and stuff him into a cage with the others. It has been months since he last heard the Frenchman on the shortwave, a year since he held the water-stained copy of the Principles of Mechanics. Not so long ago, he let himself dream of Berlin and its great scientists, Fritz Haber, inventor of fertilizer, Hermann Staudinger, inventor of plastics, Hertz, who made the invisible visible. All the great men doing things out there. "I believe in you," Frau Elena used to say. "I think you'll do something great." Now, in his nightmares, he walks the tunnels of the mines. The ceiling is smooth and black. Slabs of it descend over him as he treads. The walls splinter. He stoops, crawls. Soon he cannot raise his head, move his arms. The ceiling weighs 10 trillion tons. It gives off a permeating cold. It drives his nose into the floor. Just before he wakes, he feels a splintering at the back of his skull. Rainwater purls from cloud to roof to eave. Werner presses his forehead to the window of the dormer and peers through the drops. The roof below, just one among a cluster of wet rooftops, hemmed in by the vast walls of the cokery and smelter and gasworks, the winding tower silhouetted against the sky, mine and mill running on, acre after acre, beyond his range of sight to the villages, the cities, the ever-quickening, ever-expanding machine that is Germany, and a million men ready to set down their lives for it. "Good evening," he thinks, or "Heil Hitler." Everyone is choosing the latter. Bye-bye, blind girl. The war drops its question mark. Memos are distributed. The collections must be protected. A small cadre of couriers has begun moving things to country estates. Locks and keys are in greater demand than ever. Marilar's father works until midnight, until 1. Every crate must be padlocked. Every transport manifest kept in a secure place. Armored trucks rumble at the loading docks. There are fossils to be safeguarded, ancient manuscripts. There are pearls, gold nuggets, a sapphire as big as a mouse. There might be, thinks Marillar, the Sea of Flames. From a certain angle, the spring seems so calm, warm, tender, each night redolent and composed, and yet everything radiates tension, as if the city had been built upon the skin of a balloon and someone is inflating it toward the breaking point. Bees work the blooming aisles of the Jardin des Plantes. The plane trees drop their seeds and huge drifts of fluff gather on the walkways. If they attack, why would they attack? They would be crazy to attack. To retreat is to save lives. Deliveries stop. Sandbags appear around the museum gates. A pair of soldiers on the roof of the Gallery of Paleontology peer over the gardens with binoculars. But the huge bowl of the sky remains untracked. No Zeppelins, no bombers, no superhuman paratroopers, just the last songbirds returning from their winter homes and the quicksilver winds of spring transmuting into the heavier, greener breezes of summer. Rumor, light, air. The May seems more beautiful than any Marie-Laure can remember. On the morning of her 12th birthday, there is no puzzle box in the place of the sugar bowl when she wakes. Her father is too busy. But there's a book, the second Braille volume of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, as thick as a sofa cushion. A thrill rides all the way into the nails of her fingers. How? You're welcome, Marie. The walls of their flat tremble with the dragging of furniture, the packing of trunks, the nailing shut of windows. They walk to the museum, and her father remarks distractedly to the warder who meets him at the door, "They say we're holding the river." Marie-Laure sits on the floor of the key pound and opens her book. When part 1 left off, Professor Aronnax had traveled only 6,000 miles, so many left to go. But something strange happens. The words do not connect. She reads, "During the entire day, a formidable school of sharks followed the ship, but the logic that's supposed to link each word to the next fails her." Someone says, "Has the director left?" Someone else says, "Before the end of the week." Her father's clothes smell of straw. His fingers reek of oil. Work, more work. Then a few hours of exhausted sleep before returning to the museum at dawn. Trucks carry off skeletons and meteorites and octopi in jars and herbarium sheets and Egyptian gold and South African ivory and Permian fossils. On the 1st of June, airplanes fly over the city extremely high, crawling through the stratus clouds. When the wind is down and nobody is running an engine nearby, Marie-Laure can stand outside the Gallery of Zoology and hear them. A mile-high purr. The following day, the radio stations begin disappearing. The warders in the guard station whack the side of their wireless and tilt it this way and that, but only static comes back out of the speakers, as if each relay antenna were a candle flame, as if each relay antenna were a candle flame, and a pair of fingers came along and pinched it out. Those last nights in Paris, walking home with her father at midnight, the huge book clasped against her chest, Marie-Laure thinks she can sense a shiver beneath the air. In the pauses between the chirping of the insects, like the spider cracks of ice when too much weight is set upon it. As if all this time, the city has been no more than a scale model built by her father, and the shadow of a great hand has fallen over it. Didn't she presume she would live with her father in Paris for the rest of her life? That she would always sit with Dr. Geffard in the afternoons? That every year on her birthday, her father would present her with another puzzle and another novel, and she would read all of Jules Verne and all of Dumas and maybe even Balzac and Proust? That her father would always hum as he fashioned little buildings in the evening, and she would always know how many paces from the front door to the bakery, 40, and how many more to the brasserie, 32. And there would always be sugar to spoon into her coffee when she woke. Bonjour, bonjour. Potatoes at 6 o'clock, Marie. mushrooms at 3. Now, what will happen now?